It was just a photograph of three friends, until researchers deciphered the hand signals they were making. The New Orleans humidity clung to everything like a second skin, as Dr. Sarah Bennett stepped into Rousseau's antique emporium on Royal Street. It was late August 2024, and the heat pressed down in waves, seeping through the old brick and iron balconies of the French Quarter. Sarah had spent the last 3 years studying African-American women's networks in the post-Reconstruction South. An experience had taught her that the greatest discoveries often hid in unexpected corners. The shop brimmed with remnants of forgotten lives, tarnished silverware, cracked porcelain dolls, oil portraits with peeling gilt frames, towers of sepia-stained photographs. Maurice Rousseau, the elderly Creole owner, barely looked up from his newspaper when she entered. When she asked about photographs from the 1890 to early 1900, particularly images of black subjects, he nodded toward the dim rear of the store and told her she was welcome to search through a few boxes from an estate sale. She dug through 3 weathered cartons stuffed with photographs, letters, and documents. Most were predictable. Formal portraits of white families in stiff Victorian clothes, children posed in sailor suits, old couples marking anniversaries. But one photograph, wrapped with care in yellowed tissue near the bottom, stopped her cold. It was larger than the others, about 10 excess 12 inches, and unusually well preserved. Unlike studio portraits, this one was candid, a street scene captured with startling clarity. Wrought iron balconies framed a bustling French Quarter street, figures blurred mid-stride, sunlight bright on brick and cobblestone. At the center walked 3 black women, side by side, wearing matching white dresses that glowed like lanterns among the crowd. They moved with confidence, gowns swaying, faces calm and self-possessed, one tall and slender, turning slightly toward the camera, one shorter, rounder, smiling gently, the third serious and forward-focused. Their hands appeared casual at first glance, one adjusting her skirt, one held at her side, another lifted slightly. Yet something about them felt intentional, too precise to be natural. When Sarah flipped the photograph over, a faded inscription read, "Royal Street, October 14th, 1899, the 3 in white." Back home, she set up her high-resolution scanner, eager and electric with curiosity. She digitized the image, opened it on her laptop, and zoomed in with methodical precision. Their faces remained sharp even under magnification. The photographer had been skilled, but it was their hands that made her pulse spike. The woman on the left formed a deliberate circle with her thumb and index finger, the other fingers extended. The woman in the middle held a different shape, 2 fingers raised, the others tucked under her thumb. The woman on the right displayed a third configuration. Fingers spread, then folded into an unmistakable pattern. 3 distinct signs, 3 women, 3 signals. Sarah began sketching the shapes in her notebook, cross-referencing hand sign systems, secret societies, coded gestures used in the late 19th century. Nothing quite matched, yet she knew this was no coincidence. These women were communicating silently and deliberately, in plain view, and someone thought what they were doing mattered enough to preserve the moment for more than a century. She searched the New Orleans newspaper archives for October 1899, seeking context. At Tulane University the next morning, her colleague Dr. Marcus Webb brought forward bound copies of The Times-Democrat and the Daily Picayune. Hours passed as she combed through brittle pages. Then, buried inside the October 16th issue, 2 days after the photograph was taken, she found a brief, chilling report. Negro woman killed in 4th Ward. Marie Laveau, age 34, residing on Burgundy Street, found dead in her home. Police deemed the circumstances suspicious. Her breath caught. A murder. A date. 3 women walking in white with coded hands. The photograph was no ordinary keepsake. It was a message, a warning, a record. and Sarah had just opened the first door. Several neighbors had reported seeing unfamiliar white men near the area earlier that day, yet no arrests were made. The article was short, wedged between advertisements like a detail someone hoped would be forgotten. Sarah kept reading. By October 18th, the death had been officially ruled a suicide. Family and neighbors protested, insisting it was impossible, but the case was closed anyway. On October 20th, a letter to the editor challenged the conclusion. 2 days later, another article dismissed the concerns as inflammatory and unfounded. Then the trail went cold. The story vanished. Marcus brought over a box of materials from St. Augustine Church in the Treme neighborhood, and inside the funeral records from October 1899, Sarah found confirmation. Marie Laveau's service had been held on October 19th. The note listed a large turnout of women from the community, and 3 women in white dresses who served as honorary pallbearers, specifically requested by the deceased, the same 3 in white. Sarah's hands shook as she combed through more church documents. She found 2 additional funerals from late 1899, where the same phrasing appeared, the same women serving as pallbearers. Each victim was a black woman. Each death bore traces of silence, inconsistency, or suspicion. Marcus returned with personal papers belonging to the descendants of Father Augustus Thibault, priest at St. Augustine from 1895 to 1910. In the 1899 journal, Sarah found an entry dated October 15th, 1 day after the photograph. Met today with the 3 sisters. They came to report another death. Marie L., a good woman who told the truth and paid for it. The sisters showed me their records, careful and exact. They have witnessed 17 deaths now. 17 women taken, denied justice. I admire their courage and fear for the weight they bear. She read the entry again and again. The 3 women in the photograph were not simply friends. They were witnesses, archivists of truth, recording murders no one else would acknowledge. In the following days, she devoured every page of Thibault's journals. The priest never wrote their names, likely to protect them, but the detail he recorded was staggering. The network began in 1897, created in response to a string of murdered black women whose cases had been dismissed. When police and newspapers refused to investigate, 3 women built their own system of justice, not through courts, but through memory, testimony, and coded documentation. They developed hand signs that could pass as ordinary movements, adjusting a sleeve, brushing hair back, tugging at a skirt hem. Signals for "I witnessed this death," "justice denied," "truth recorded," gestures small enough to go unnoticed, powerful enough to preserve history. Another entry from November 3rd, 1899, described a death the sisters witnessed. They made the sign as she passed, so she would know she was seen, so she would know she was remembered. A later entry from March 1900 revealed everything. The 3 were not alone. Dozens of women across New Orleans had trained in the signs, creating an unbreakable living archive, a record that could not be burned, seized, or censored because it lived in hands, eyes, memory. Sarah returned to the photograph with new eyes. She looked again at the hands in the image, recognizing the signals instantly. The left woman's circle, witness, the middle woman's separated fingers, justice denied. The right woman's extended pinky and thumb, truth recorded. All 3 signs shown at once, walking in formation through Royal Street. A declaration of purpose, captured with intent by someone who understood exactly what it meant. She contacted Dr. Rebecca Chen, an expert in forensic photography. At her lab, they began spectral imaging to draw out unseen layers of the photo. As details emerged, Dr. Chen leaned forward, eyes sharp. There were more signals, not just the 3 women. In the background, in doorways, at windows. A woman touching her throat in a coded gesture. A man with fingers curled into a specific pattern. A second-story window where a woman's hand echoed yet another sign. A dozen more at least. quiet, organized, coordinated. This wasn't three women. It was an entire network standing together in daylight. Reflections in storefront glass revealed even more. Another group across the street, also signaling. In one window, a poster appeared when magnified. Meeting Thursday 8 p.m., St. Augustine, dated October 12, 1899, 2 days before the photograph. They had gathered, they had planned, and on October 14th, they walked the streets of the French Quarter to show their numbers. When Dr. Chen enhanced the hem of the middle woman's dress, dark patches appeared. Blood. She had likely come straight from the scene of Marie Laveau's death to join the march captured in the photograph. With further enhancement, the expressions of the women shifted. Beneath the composure, sorrow lived. Beneath the resolve, fury. In their eyes lay exhaustion, pain, yet unbroken purpose. The weight of 18 deaths held in memory because no one else would carry them. They had been invisible to history, silenced in archives, erased from records, until now. Marcus Webb called Sarah 3 days later with news. He'd found something in the Archdiocese archives, a locked box in the St. Augustine collection labelled Father Thibault, personal, do not open. After months of waiting, he finally received permission to access it. Within the hour, Sarah met him at the archives. The box was small, dark wood, the lock corroded with age. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather-bound notebook. The handwriting belonged to Father Thibault, but nearly every page was written in code. Initials instead of names, symbols in place of locations, dates hidden in a complex number system. It took Sarah hours of work before a pattern slowly revealed itself. The notebook wasn't just a journal. It was a ledger, a complete record of deaths witnessed and documented by the three women in the photograph. Each entry listed initials of the victim, the date, the location, the cause of death, and most importantly, a description or name of the perpetrator. One entry stopped Sarah cold. ML, October 14th, 1899. Cause, beaten to death. Perpetrators, 3 white men. Names known to witnesses. Police response, ruled suicide. Case closed. There were 83 entries in total. 83 black women murdered between 1897 and 1904. Their deaths dismissed, erased, or deliberately misclassified. And that wasn't all. Tucked among the pages was something even more astonishing. A key to the hand signal system seen in the photograph. Over 30 gestures, each one carrying meaning. A circle with fingers extended, witness present. 2 fingers split apart, justice denied. Thumb and pinky raised, truth recorded. A single finger pointing down, danger present. An open palm turning in a slow circle, safe house nearby. Interlaced fingers, meeting site confirmed. It was an entire covert language built by black women in New Orleans, invisible to the authorities watching them. For the first time, Sarah had names. The women in white were Celeste Rousseau, age 31, Josephine Dea, age 28, and Marie-Claire Dubois, age 33. Seamstress, laundry worker, midwife. Ordinary women who had built an extraordinary resistance network. In Father Thibault's notes were fragments of their struggles, being followed after witnessing a killing on Rampart Street, questioned by police after appearing at too many death scenes, threatened by family of a perpetrator. Yet always they continued. Letters were pressed between the pages, correspondence between Father Thibault and abolitionists, northern priests, activists, tracking racial violence across the South. They weren't working alone. A journalist in New York wrote in 1899, "These women are creating an archive that future generations will desperately need. When it is safe, their testimony must be published." But safety never came for them. The notebook was hidden away, guarded for more than a century, waiting for someone to find it. By 1900, the network had grown to 50 women. Safe houses existed across the city. Businesses quietly hired and protected survivors. When escape was necessary, they arranged passage out of New Orleans entirely. Suddenly, the famous photograph, dated October 14th, 1899, had a new weight. It wasn't simply a portrait, it was defiance. The three founders walked down Royal Street, hands posed in silent language, surrounded by others doing the same, a message preserved for the future. The day after the photograph was taken, Father Thibault wrote, "The sisters walked openly, signs visible. A photographer who understands captured the moment. This image is for those not yet born." With the founders identified, Sarah began searching for their descendants. Census led her to marriage records, birth certificates, church logs. Celeste Rousseau married Thomas Baptiste in 1901 and had 4 children. Her family line still lived in New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Josephine never married, but she raised her sister's 3 children as her own. Their descendants held her name. Marie Claire married twice, her bloodline spreading across Texas, California, Illinois. Sarah contacted living relatives one by one, carefully explaining what she had uncovered. The first to respond was Patricia Baptiste, 72 years old, still living in the Tremaine neighborhood, the same place St. Augustine Church still stands. She was Celeste's great-great-granddaughter. They met over coffee. Sarah brought copies of the photograph, enhanced images, pages from the notebook. Patricia studied them silently as tears fell. She said her grandmother once told her that Celeste did important work, dangerous work. But she never spoke of details. "Better not to know," she'd said. Now the truth was open in front of her. Celeste had lived to be 78 years old. Patricia told Sarah that Celeste had died in 1944, when her mother was still a teenager. She never spoke about the work she had done, but everyone sensed she carried both sorrow and immense strength. When Sarah showed her the enhanced images, hand signals, hidden gestures, the network of women in the background, Patricia's hands shook as she finally understood the scale of what her ancestor had helped create. She whispered that Celeste was a hero, a woman who ensured dozens of deaths were not forgotten. Over the next several weeks, Sarah located descendants of all, 3 founders. She arranged a gathering at St. Augustine Church, so families could view the photograph together and learn what had been uncovered. 15 people arrived, from their 30s to their 80s, some meeting for the first time and discovering that their ancestors had worked side by side in dangerous secrecy. Sarah began at the beginning. How a photograph had led to hand signals, which led to Father Thibault's notebook, which unravelled an entire network. Enhanced images filled a projection screen, revealing more than a dozen people making coded signs throughout the street scene. She told them that their ancestors witnessed 83 deaths, comforted victims, supported grieving families, and refused to let violence go undocumented. She read aloud from Father Thibault's notebook, sharing passages that described Celeste, Josephine, and Marie Claire's devotion and the risks they took. She explained how the network expanded, how it saved women's lives, how it survived by being invisible to those who never looked closely enough to see. Marcus Webb spoke next, calling the discovery one of the most important revelations in the history of black women's resistance. He said these women built an infrastructure of memory and protection, one that preserved truths the world would otherwise have buried. Dr. Chen followed, showing how the signals were constructed to blend into everyday movement. Families asked questions, exchanged memories, and pieced together old family remarks and inherited gestures that suddenly held new meaning. Some recalled their grandmothers, using small, strange hand motions they never understood, until now. Patricia Baptiste was the last to speak. She remembered her grandmother saying, "We come from women who refused to let evil have the last word." She never understood it before, but now she did. Celeste, Josephine, and Marie Claire, sisters not by blood, but by purpose, witnessed brutality, and in witnessing created power. They made sure truth would survive. 3 months later, Sarah's research appeared in the Journal of African American History, and the New Orleans African American Museum opened an exhibition built around the photograph. The original image stood at the center, surrounded by magnified details, showing the signals hidden in plain sight. Father Tybolt's notebook rested nearby in a climate-controlled case, open to the page where the founders' names were written. Next to it were the names of the 83 women whose deaths had been documented, lives erased publicly, but preserved by the Witness Network. The exhibition taught visitors the signals, letting people practice the gestures for themselves, seeing how easily they could once pass unnoticed. Many wept, realizing how black women had built protection for one another in shadows where institutions refused to help. News spread nationwide. The photograph went viral, shared millions of times by people stunned to learn what they had, overlooked at first glance. Descendants of the 83 documented victims began reaching out, many learning for the first time the truth behind family stories or unexplained losses. The museum became a place of mourning, of revelation, of pride. Patricia, along with other descendants, began advocating publicly for this history to be taught. Schools added curriculum about the network, ensuring new generations would grow up knowing the names of these women and the quiet power they wielded. The photograph was donated to the museum permanently. A plaque beside it read that Celeste Rousseau, Josephine Deveau, and Marie-Claire Dubois were the 3 women in white who built the Witness Network, women who recorded truth when official records refused to. Their signals, once secret, now declared openly, "We witness, we remember, we record the truth." Sarah's final contribution was a digital archive, freely accessible to anyone, containing high-resolution scans of the photograph and each hand signal, full transcriptions of the notebook, family histories, and the identities of all 83 women whose deaths had been preserved. 1 year later, the city installed a memorial in Congo Square. 3 bronze women in white dresses, hands positioned in witness signs, with 83 names engraved at the base. The site became a gathering place, where visitors practiced the signals to honor the language that once lived only in secrecy. Patricia attended the dedication with her family. Standing before the statues, she raised her hands and formed 3 signals: witness, justice denied, truth recorded. Dozens of others around her followed. The signals that once protected a hidden resistance were now shared proudly under open sky. What once looked like an ordinary photograph, 3 women on Royal Street, had become proof of resistance, ingenuity, and the undiminished power of women, determined to speak truth, even when the world refused to hear it. The silent gestures captured in 1899 had finally been answered, recognized, and remembered.